Hello, I'm Elliot Franklin, reporting for Fox 25 News. I am in Israel today, speaking with Israeli LGBT expert Chelsea Wynot. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, just a few questions about issues going on in your country right now. What's your government's stance on LGBT issues?
The government is generally very supportive of same-sex couples in Israel. Israel is one of the most progressive countries in the Middle East and Asia, and same-sex sexual activity was legalized in 1988. Although same-sex marriage is not yet legal, we do recognize same-sex marriages that were performed around the world, and we're also working on what we call a covenantal partnership.
Oh, that's very interesting. Could you explain the concept of conventional partnerships?
Yes, of course. We currently have a bill on the floor to legalize covenantal partnerships in Israel. Basically, our country recognizes that current marriage law cannot hold up forever, especially in our country of many religions. For example, the current law quite insanely requires that Jewish people be married under the rabbinate by a certain set of Orthodox rabbis, which doesn't allow for interracial or interreligious marriages, much less gay marriages. So other religions also have equally harsh regulations. So we believe that it's time for a reform of those values for all religious people who want to get married outside of the strict guidelines of their religion. So in this way, we have the opportunity to legalize marriages in a way they've never quite been legalized before, especially gay marriages, by allowing all marriages and never specifically excluding gays from that definition, which I see as almost a bonus for LGBT community to be involved in a same-sex marriage bill that addresses human rights in general instead of singling out gay marriage.
And how progressive is Israel with LGBT rights in compared to some of its surrounding countries?
Well, as I said previously, Israel recognizes same-sex marriages performed in other countries, and we're the only country in the Middle East to do this. Additionally, Israel became the first country in Asia to recognize unregistered cohabitation between same-sex couples, making us the only country in the Middle East to recognize any same-sex union thus far. In terms of other rights that are pretty specific to Israel in the area, discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation was outlawed in 1992, and gays and lesbians are also allowed to serve openly in the military.
It's very interesting. Tel Aviv is known as one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, Tel Aviv, the second most populous city in Israel, has frequently been referred to by publishers as one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world, actually. Most of us are very proud of that title. Tel Aviv is also sometimes referred to as the gay capital of the Middle East, which is why I believe we have such a large gay population in the city.
Could you tell us a little bit about the compare and contrast Tel Aviv and Jerusalem?
Yeah, of course. So, as we've discussed previously, Tel Aviv is a very gay community, as one might say. Jerusalem, though, as you may know, is very religious. So, one of the most religious cities in the world, actually. So, most religions do not support LGBT rights. So you would think that Jerusalem wouldn't be the most gay-friendly community. However, in recent years, Jerusalem has become more and more accepting of homosexuality. In fact, for the last several years, they've held an LGBT pride parade in the center of the city.
Oh, a pride parade.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little about that?
Of course. So the Jerusalem Pride Parade has been held for the last 15 years annually, but it unfortunately didn't gain international coverage until 2005 when 3 marchers were stabbed during the parade. But the perpetrator was subsequently sentenced to 12 years in prison because, as I said, Jerusalem is becoming more and more progressive and just is not going to stand for those kinds of acts of hatred. But aside from that, the parade is generally a very spirited and joyous occasion that really represents how far Israel has come in terms of LGBT rights.
Wow, that sounds like a really nice festivity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I learned so much.
Thank
and
you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elliot Franklin here with James Peterson reporting for Fox 25 News. James Peterson is. I flew in from Russia. Into Russia, to ask some questions about LGBT issues taking place in Russia now. So, how has the recent anti-gay movement in Russia, due to the impending Olympics, made a difference in your country?
Well, the Olympics has brought a lot of attention to gays in our country. President Putin has put in a lot of reforms since the Olympics has been coming in. There's been a lot of new laws passed with regards to the situation, and right now they're kind of going through whether or not they actually decided they are still going to hold the Olympics in Russia. But as far as having the Olympics there, Putin has accepted gays coming to the Olympics to actually compete there. So there's been a lot of reform and a lot of new laws, anti-gay laws, into effect.
So has this attention been good or bad for your country?
The attention has been good and bad. I think attention in general is good from outside sources because you're starting to see that we're getting help from outside sources, that are pro-gay. But in the end, it doesn't really make too much of a difference because inside the country, it's the strongest reform against gays that we've ever had. So.
And how do you personally feel about Putin's recent lawmaking?
Putin's lawmaking has been extremely severe lately. There's been laws passed that prevent, that take away children from gay parents, stuff like that. There's no gay propaganda anymore or advertisements. You're not allowed to express any type of gay rights or anything like that. And for young children, you're also not allowed to talk to them about any gay rights. You're not allowed to talk to them and try to help them through things. So we're really suppressed in our country right now, and it's been a pretty rough road.
Yeah, so in terms of trying to move out of Russia, has the recent lawmaking caused some unease in the gay community?
It's a difficult situation because a lot of people in Russia, of course, if you're gay, it's not the ideal place to be. But at the same time, most of your family isn't gay, so you kind of get stuck in between. You don't want to leave your family because they're not facing the same scrutiny that you are, so they're probably not going to leave. And you just don't want to separate yourself from your family, but of course, if it gets severe enough, there has been people that have tried to get out, and some successfully and some not as successfully.
And how has the country reacted to the news that Putin would openly accept gays in the Olympics from other countries?
I think people are happy about that. Of course, it was kind of it kind of wasn't his choice too often. I would say if he went against that, I would say that they might consider actually moving the Olympics out of Russia. So they did decide to, accept those terms. But as for people inside Russia, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. They've been trying to do a few things where, like, the people in the Russian Olympics, they have, the people that work for it and host the games, they're going to be wearing, like, rainbow-colored suits and stuff like that. But it's not as much, it's to kind of take away from other people trying to do propaganda and stuff like that, just to show as if they are for gay rights, but they're really not.
So are there any anti-gay groups or anti-gay groups in the area that you know of?
Most of the anti-gay groups in the area have been church affiliations or political affiliations. There's no exact, anti-gay group, but they're all church affiliations and stuff like that. And of course, there's always pro-gay groups, but as far as actually coming together and having an official name and stuff like that, it's illegal. So we're definitely suppressed in that area.
Well, I know we're all really looking forward to you guys hosting the Olympics, so we'll talk to you more then.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hello, Elliot Franklin reporting again for Fox 25 News. I'm here with Sam Rodriguez from Chile, who's here to talk with us about LGBT issues in her country. Welcome.
Thanks.
First, could you tell me a little bit about the government's stance on LGBT issues?
Okay, so once, like, I don't know, when you think about Chile, you think of a country that is just kind of, like, is getting there, developing on these LGBT issues. But after, like, getting past that first glance, you realize that it's kind of lacking in a lot of places. Like, yes, there's same-sex, like, activity that's legal, but on the other hand, same-sex marriage isn't legal. There are a lot of exclusions, like same-sex couples can adopt. Like, they're not even recognized by the government. So currently, the government is kind of lacking on that aspect. And the current president also is on the side of, like, again, being against LGBT issues. Like, he like, in many accounts has said that he completely defines marriage between a man and a woman. So he's just completely against it. And kind of the president as, like, a big figurehead is kind of, like, runs the government.
And so history kind of points to the country of Chile as being primarily Catholic. What is the Catholic Church's stance on LGBT issues?
So it takes, the Catholic Church actually takes the same viewpoint as the president is. They're very conservative, and they have a lot of control over the government. Not as much as recently, but, like, in the past, like up to, I think, 2004, the country was actually, like, divorce was illegal because the Catholic Church didn't like it, like, is against divorce. So the Catholic Church has had, like, a lessening grip on the government, but it definitely has a lot of say over the government, and it's very conservative. So you can see how that kind of flows with the LGBT issues as well.
I know that there's a lot of prevalent indigenous groups in Chile. Can you tell me about any of those groups?
So the Mapuche people are the largest indigenous group, and they're very, like, LGBT friendly, which I think is pretty cool, because I don't know, I guess I would expect it to be otherwise. But the LGBT community and, like, standpoint from Mapuche is that the Mapuche are okay with like, having lesbian leaders, and they think that they're very strong, as well as, like, they're not ever going to have children. So that is kind of cool that the Mapuche are just okay with it.
Yeah, definitely. What protection is there for LGBT community in Chile?
So there is an anti-discrimination law that is trying to, like, lessen the blows that the LGBT people are becoming, like, used to, or, like, having to deal with. And it actually states that it is trying to protect and guarantee the rights of family, and not having that only between a man and a woman, but also as, like, gay couples. It protects 17 different categories of people, and that includes, like, sexual orientation, gender, but there's still, like, certain like, there's no consequences for firing an LGBT, like, person. So yes, they're kind of progressive, but then yeah, they're kind of lacking in some aspects.
Right. So who's fighting for these rights?
So there are a lot of, like, LGBT groups. Like, I know in the United States we have, like, the HRC, but in Chile they have MOVIL, which is El Movimiento de Integración y Liberación Homosexual. They were established in 1991, and they organize, like, the Pride marches, and it's cool because Chile actually has had Pride marches since 2006. So.
That is really interesting. Yeah. Are there any issues going on in the news now?
I wouldn't say they're issues, but I think something that I found that was really interesting was they are actually a woman named Valentina Verbal is actually a trans woman who is in the election for a possible, like, Chilean Congress seat. So it's pretty cool. It'll be the first time ever someone that was trans ended up in Congress. Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, so overall I think Chile is very, in some ways, lacking, and then in some ways being progressive, but I think it's a country that has a lot of, like, room for development, definitely.
Wow, that is really cool. Thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot, and have a good day.
All right, thanks. You too.